Hello and welcome everybody. I'm so excited and glad to have you here. My name is Shyloe Fayad, and this is Real Lives, Real People with Shyloe. What I could tell you about myself is this. I'm a certified transformational life coach. I'm a high school French immersion teacher, and I'm a mother of 4. But what I'd like to tell you about myself is that I am very curious. I am curious about people, and I'm curious about their journey. And that is why we are here today. The concept for the show began quite a few years ago when I realized that I asked a lot of questions. I'm quite the question asker, and I used to ask everybody I came across questions that they would tell me weren't the usual questions. I'm not very good at small talk, just to let you know, as all my friends already know. When you talk to me, I want to get to the real stuff, the stuff that's going on underneath things like the weather or where you live in the city that we are both in at the moment. So today I have the pleasure of sharing space with a friend of mine, Jen Engracio, and I'm super excited because I met Jen quite a few years ago in our work as teachers. What I could tell you about Jen is that she's a shamanic practitioner, a teacher, and an author, actually. But what I'd like to tell you about her is the fact that I think she is very sparkly. The first time I ever saw her, I was totally captivated by her sparkly eyes and just her very presence in the room. She emits this real feeling of love and trust and kindness and compassion. And so I thought she'd be a perfect guest on my very first show. And I'm excited and also a little nervous to be here. I've been awake like off and on since 6, dreaming of all these like computer troubleshooting things. So anyway, I think I'll just bring Jen on and let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Great. There she is. Hey, Jen, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great, too. I'm glad we got through the little bit of the computer glitch we had going on before we started.
Yes.
So I won't be asking about the weather in Calgary. But what I will be asking you about is some of the stuff I read. I know you've written a book, and it's available on Amazon. And in preparation for our time together today, I read a couple articles that you had written. And one of the articles in particular that I was really fascinated about was the article where you talked about HSP, which is an acronym for highly sensitive people, and talked about being an empath. Can you share a little bit with our viewers about what HSP really is, what an empath is, and how it affects you in your daily living, or affects people who have this in their daily living?
Well, I can speak about it from a shamanic point of view.
Okay, great.
I can't really. Well, there would probably be, if it had a diagnosis, it would look differently. Like, so especially for people that are teachers, they would notice the highly sensitive kids in their classroom, or parents, From a shamanic point of view, a highly sensitive person is someone who notices and feels all of the energy in a space at a heightened level. So there's some people that can walk into a room and they won't notice emotional tension. They won't notice how people are feeling. They won't notice a lot of subtle things that we can't see, but that are in a space. A highly sensitive person feels all of that and senses all of that. So kind of like animals, they know what's in a space, even though we can't see it. And it might not seem important to humans. And I don't know that it's not important to us, but we've adapted in such a way as a species where our lives are so noisy and busy that we actually don't pay attention to those things anymore. But there's, the estimates I've read is about 20% of the population, which is pretty high. People that have not lost that are still very much in tune with those animal instincts.
If I can just add, the one thing I noticed on my own personal journey in terms of healing is that we've been taught as a society, as a culture, to really trust what we see and what we hear above what's going on inside, right? And so that lends itself to a lot of confusion, because I would say for myself, I'm a very sensitive person. I can easily pick up on what's going on around me, but I was taught to really downplay that and only pay attention to what's going on here. And that was a big challenge. And it continues to be a challenge for me in terms of navigating what I'm sensing is going on, as opposed to the way things appear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess the shamanic practice really, what it gave me was a way to, first of all, validate that those things were real. Because when I was a kid, I got myself into some trouble because people don't want to admit what's in a space a lot of times. But as a kid, I was just always like, well, why are you pretending that this isn't in a space when it so obviously is? Right?
Exactly.
When I was a kid, I learned really quickly in the different environments I was in, whether it was in my family or at school, to not do that. Because it made people really nervous.
Right. Yes. Yes.
You know, B, people didn't like, you know, since then I've had people say, you know, it makes me nervous when you see everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I can't not see everything. What I can do is not go into people's space, which I don't do. Right. That was something I was trained not to do in shamanism, unless they give me permission for a healing purpose, or we're going on a journey or something. But still, I mean, the fact that I've just learned not to verbalize it. Right. But I can't not walk into a space and ignore about 80% of the information that I get. I don't think it's a good survival strategy either.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, you know, as you were telling your story about, you know, being a child and how ways in which you learn to sort of be in the world so that you could be safe or whatever, you know, instead of always picking up on this stuff and saying something and maybe, I don't know, you know, having some sort of negative consequences as a result. I think I was about 7 years old when I walked into my parents' bedroom, because that's where our TV was. Our house was set up kind of funny, like their master bedroom was like our living room too. And I remember saying to them, I need to see a psychiatrist. And they were like, oh, Shyloe, you're so funny. And I was like, I need to see a psychiatrist. Like, I don't know how I knew that word, but I knew something was not right. Something was not right in the household, which it wasn't, obviously, in the end, right? But I had that sense, and nobody would validate it. So I wanted to see someone else that could say to me, yes, you're right, Shyloe, what you're picking up on is actually for real, even though nobody's talking about it, right? So that's what I hear a little bit of what you're talking about, is that, you know, you have an awareness, but a good portion of people either aren't talking about it or aren't aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, to be fair to the adults around me growing up, they didn't understand it. And so, you know, I can see why it would be a little bit scary. For me as an adult, when I started practicing shamanism and working with people who understood energy, who validated something that was real, validating that some people, you know, feel emotions like in other people, like they would feel it in their own body. Those things, that was like, you know, the first time in my life where I felt like I wasn't crazy.
Right.
Because all of a sudden I was in a group of all these other people who had, some of them had been fortunate to grow up in cultures where that was just already validated. There was no, you know, there was no problem with that. You know, a lot of Indigenous people that I was friends with in high school or that I talked to, they just got this. I didn't really have to explain this to them too much.
Right.
You know, but, you know, it was really great to be with people that understood, but also with people who could train me, who could teach me how to live in our world without having to give up that gift and without having to find ways, or first of all, to stop medicating myself so that I could live in the density of this world.
Right.
but also to not damp down the gift so that I could keep utilizing it in a way that actually serves me, but also serves ultimately the people that I work with.
Right. And so that's a great segue into your book, you know, talking a little bit about without dampening it. So tell me a little bit about this book. I'm curious about it.
Well, I worked about 7 years ago. I worked pretty diligently for about a year. Well, more than a year, healing a food addiction, a lifelong food addiction. And I used shamanic medicine to do it. I'd done things like talk therapy in the past, and I'd seen, you know, family therapists and that kind of thing. But those ways just did not work for me. And, you know, it's hard to explain to a psychologist some of the things that I could talk about with other shamanic practitioners, where they would just accept that my experience was valid, was real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I would, you know, test out the waters a little bit when I was working with counselors and professional people sometimes, but I was pretty frustrated with the fact that I was not going to get help in conventional means by in the mainstream way.
Mm-hmm.
So it just made sense. And I worked with my teacher for about a year, every single day. We connected, and yeah, I just worked my butt off to try to heal all these pieces using the shamanic medicine tools that I was trained in.
Mm-hmm.
With her support, but also with the support of a community of fellow practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept working with addicts after that in our community, people that would come in that wanted to go on the journey, but I really had no intention of writing a book. Mm-hmm. And I was hiking one day in the mountains, and my grandpa's spirit came to me and started talking to me, and I'm like, ugh. When he shows up, it's usually for a reason, but he basically gave me permission to tell his story because he also struggled with addiction when he was here alive on Earth. Sorry. And so he was very insistent that this book had to be written because, of course, it's still a taboo subject. There's a lot of you can't talk about addiction without talking about some of the problems. And this also includes some of the problems that we have in families.
Yes.
And some of the intergenerational trauma that has happened in families. And so it was not a book I wanted to write. Mm-hmm. The other two books, it was exciting. It was a journey. It was interesting. This book, I was like, I wrote because my ancestors told me to write it.
Okay.
And I knew it was important for legacy, but it wasn't a fun book to write. But it was very healing.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So we don't have a bunch of time left. I just have one more question. Then if you could just let our viewers know how they could get your book as well after we answer this question. And my question has to do with, you know, in terms of your own journey around food addiction and in terms of understanding your grandfather's journey as a result of writing this book or whatever, what would you offer to viewers as something they could take away that you found was most helpful in general in this journey? Like, was there one thing, one practice that you had, or was it, you know, you mentioned in the one article I read the importance of support and community. You know, what would be one thing that you could just leave them with that they could ponder in terms of maybe the addiction that they're suffering from or a loved one is suffering from? Is there something you could offer them just to take?
Yeah, you can't heal an addiction without a daily practice of forgiveness. Forgiving yourself. And also it's pretty vital to find a way to forgive the people around you.
Okay.
And ancestors, and maybe, you know, someone who abused you sexually, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. The process has to happen daily, even after, you know, somebody's got good command around their addiction.
Yeah.
It's not something you can drop. It's something that you need there is a practice that we do, which is a little bit more complicated than I can explain in a few minutes.
Right. Yeah.
But however people do that, whatever tradition, that's vital.
Yeah. I agree, because even for myself, in terms of my own healing, you know, the fact that I suffered from depression for as many years as I did, and then coming out of that, and I have a rigorous daily practice. Like, it's crucial to my mental health for sure. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's definitely rigorous daily practice. It's something I need to do every day. Mostly involves prayer, meditation, and journaling, but definitely. So how can we get a hold of your book? Where can we locate it?
It's available worldwide. Here in Canada, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Chapters. It's also available Barnes and Nobles, Goodreads, all the major places you would find books. You can basically get it online. Yeah.
Okay. And what if you don't happen to have it at your house that you could just show it to people nearby? No.
I don't have it nearby, no.
My other question is, how can people get a hold of you? If somebody wants to work with you or talk with you about their journey, or I don't know if you work with people one-on-one, can viewers get a hold of you?
I do. I run Spiral Dance Shamanics here in Calgary, but certainly I have online sessions with people because some people don't live here in Calgary.
Okay.
My website is www.spiraldanceshamanics.com, and all the information is on there for contact.
Okay, great. Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jen. This was fantastic. Thanks for being our first guest today.
Thanks for having me. Congrats on the new show.
Oh, thanks. I just feel like I'm fumbling around, having fun. So that's good. And I see our friends Wendy, Haley, and Katie Lucky joined us today, and there's some other viewers. So that's great. And I'm going to click a little end broadcast here, but stay around because I can talk to you a bit longer, Jen, after we've ended the broadcast. Okay, stay tuned for the next show next week, Sunday. I'll have to announce when it's at, because I kind of like this 10:20 time. I was going to do it at 7 at night, but maybe we'll stick with 10:20. But thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Okay, this has got a delayed end broadcast situation here with BeLive TV. It wants me to end it twice, and then I can always end up having a slight blooper at the end. There we go.